All right, good morning. Yeah, my name is Järvinen, and I'm going to talk to you about trends in VR, especially game development, but I will obviously make points about VR in more general terms. Yeah, this is really about introduction to my research project. So Game Futures is a research and consulting initiative of mine that I'm conducting largely at Sheffield Hallam University, where I also work at. And yeah, that's it. That's my 77-year-old mother trying out VR for the first time. So that's what I'm doing. So basically, I do have a long 15-year career in mobile games, social games, online game space in different roles. And what I'm really trying to bring into the table with this initiative is that I understand the day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month challenges that game developers are facing. And then I know that depending on the platform, every 6 months to 2-3 years, there's a really big decision of starting a new project and investing a lot of time and resources into a project. So what I'm really trying to do with this initiative is to help game studios to think about future in a more structured way. And my unique combination of industry and academic credentials really helps me in adapting, for instance, research having to do with trends and things like that to the day-to-day needs of game developers, and that's what I'm trying to do here. So Game Futures is about a certain number of things that I'm trying to do, taking disciplines so-called strategic foresight, trend diagnosis, scenario creation, and applying that for the purposes of basically game studio executives, publishers, investors making more informed analytical decisions of where to bank on for the future. And VR is one case study of this, and obviously a very topical project at the moment. One inspiration I have this talk and for the whole project is this quote from Bill Gates, which I think in a fascinating way describes our tendency to both overestimate the short-term future, but then underestimate the change that happens in longer-term future. So what I'm really trying to then build are tools and methods with which we wouldn't over or underestimate the sort of 2 to 5 years future. And I'm not saying that I can predict the future, because nobody can, but what I'm saying is that I'm putting together tools and methods to think about that difficult thing called future in a more structured way. Okay. I do want to start with a personal anecdote, that this is something that I said to my research game development colleagues, research scholar friends, and everybody around me, that pervasive augmented reality games will never break. I fundamentally believe that people wouldn't be willing to change their daily routines, their daily trivial goals, to the goals a game imposes on them. And then obviously this happened. And then my friends keep reminding me about what I said. And, and then it's fair enough. But from the context of this project, what I started thinking that, okay, what did it take for Pokemon Go to become such a big success? And that brings us to the whole idea of looking at trends and really reverse engineering current successes, and how that kind of reverse engineering can be put into use for kind of like future engineering the next hit products. So if we look at the context, this is a couple of things that I'm going to be repeating in this next 15 minutes is enabling context and disabling context. And these are something that are relevant for trends. Do trends sort of become mainstream, or do they die out? And now, for instance, to basically set the scene for Pokemon Go's success, we needed to have, since I said that thing, we needed to have really the smartphone explosion, iPhone and all that. We needed to also have more sort of qualitative, social, cultural things having to do with that. It's just like during the last few years, it has become more acceptable to go around everywhere to point your phone at things. And so these are the enabling context that Pokemon Go had going for it. But then obviously there's the brand. which is a big thing. But still, had Pokemon Go been released like 2009, I still think it wouldn't have been quite such a success. So it's this kind of context and how to reverse engineer and kind of future engineer them that I'm looking at. And this is really the trend framework that I'm going to use in this talk and in my general analysis of trends. So all trends tend to have these 4 characteristics, so actually 5. There's a direction. They start from somewhere. They're trying to get somewhere, like the VR is trying to get to the mass market. There's a life cycle. They start, they go through a certain number of phases. I'll come back to that in a minute. And as I said, there are enabling contexts to them, and then there are disabling contexts. And identifying these helps us understand better why, for instance, VR is at the position where it's at the moment. And I'll summarize in the end how I see all this play out. And also, important thing here is that if you're analyzing trends and you are not able to identify a counter trend, then you're probably not analyzing well enough. Your analysis is not adequate. And I'm actually going to say that AR at the moment is the counter trend to VR. So think about that. Okay, so let's first talk about a little bit about where this life cycle phase where VR is as a trend. So there's been a lot of talk about 2016 being the year of VR. If you look at Google Books, this Ngram viewer, which looks at the body of literature, big body of literature and mentions of keywords. And if you look at virtual reality, you will see that it was actually 1998 that seemed to be the year of VR. And obviously, this is explained by the fact that 1993, 1998, that was really the last time VR tried to break into the mass market. I was then back in the uni studying literature, believe it or not, but still coming across and really getting into this whole idea of virtual reality for the first time. Now, obviously, part of the decline of the graph is explained that lots of stuff has moved online, but partly it's explained that as a trend, VR really died out after 1998. And I also want to bring this historical context here in a more broad sense that I was last week in Poland and had an opportunity to visit this great panorama, a 360 sort of a physical environment which sort of puts you in the middle of a battle a few centuries ago, a very important battle regarding the Polish history. And that just tells us and puts us into this context that as human beings, we have this ongoing need to sort of immerse ourselves 360 into an environment. And VR seems to be the culmination with the help of technology to achieve, but that there are historical precedents such as panoramas. And then there are obviously, with predictions, there always comes humor, like in this example that computer gaming world predicted in '92 that there's going to be affordable VR by 1994. And here we are. Is VR still affordable? I'm not quite sure. So we have been there with VR before, and one sort of conclusion from this is that trends tend to have, or they can have, this one phase, and it's called revival, and that's really where we are now. So if you look at Google Trends, definitely like from the launch and basically announcement of the Oculus and stuff like that, it really has picked up. So let's move into talking about VR, the direction of the trend. That's, I think, the most important and interesting thing here. So obviously we've had a number of sales forecasts, lots of not that much accurate data out there. Super Data, for instance, has been producing these, and they give you an indication of the scope of the market, obviously. But for me, the important thing here is that they've been downgraded all the time. They haven't really been sort of, said that they are too moderate or anything like that. So, for instance, PSVR having to do with distribution problems was heavily sort of decreased the estimate from Super Data later last year. And if you put this again into the context of how technologies are adopted, how emerging technologies enter the market, I think VR nowadays, at this very moment, is very well sort of poised to go along this curve, that this so-called saddle model, where basically what we're seeing is that the enthusiasts, the gamers, the evangelists have bought the headsets, so we are on that first sort of a peak, and now there's very few people who feel the need to buy the headsets actually. So we are sort of gone through the saddle, and we're sort of waiting for the true commercialization of VR. And let's see how that plays out. So, and one thing that I'm doing as part of this project is a case studies, number of case studies looking at different app store trends. And now regarding VR and especially games, I'm looking at Steam Spy data, which is not 100% accurate, but it's good enough for me to give an indication where the market is going. And I'm especially interested in this from the content side of things, having been a game designer and still having my own sort of hobbyist projects in game development and design. And I'm hoping to include the Oculus Store going forward to this analysis. But basically what I'm now looking at is the VR-only tag on Steam, because I'm interested in the VR native titles. I'm not really interested on games that have been out there for a few years and have added VR functionality. I'm interested in how people see, from a creative standpoint, what kind of games are they starting to create and publish and launch for VR. So this is my analysis of that Steam Spy's data month by month, categorizing those titles into genres. From April last year, when the really sort of significant number of titles started to come out, until the end of the year. And obviously, genre divisions are always, they're not absolute, but they do, for instance, in this place, give you an indication what is out there. So you see a lot of action titles, you see a lot of different simulations of certain kinds, lots of shooters and stuff like that. And what is also obviously interesting to see that certainly the number of launch titles is picking up, and it's interesting to see now after Christmas and end of the year how that number of titles is still developing. And really, I'll come to my sort of basic conclusion from this in a minute. But before that, there are definitely interesting developer stories out there, which basically say that there are lots of things going forward, this enabling context for VR, but there are definitely challenges. So, for instance, that's stuff that people get, even people who buy this headset, they get lots of stuff for free in bundles and so on and so forth. So there might be lots of vanity in metrics having to do with download in relation to revenue. And also, we can ask that, okay, what quality of engagement is it really with VR game titles? So here you see graphs from 3 games, again from the Steam Spy data, having to do with playtime distribution across like hours, starting with 0 and going to tens of hours. And so you can guess maybe that there's one title, a PC title, No Man's Sky, very much anticipated, a big disappointment in many ways for players, but still, it's the one that has the tens and tens of hours of playtime distribution, whereas the well-reviewed 2 VR titles still very much showcase the fact that people play these games for 30 minutes, an hour, and then they gather dust. So it's challenging, even if you create hours and hours of content as a developer, who's going to actually play that through. And the VR mindshare, it's increasing. So you can see here the green graph is going up in terms of total hours played on Steam. But then if you look at it in the bigger scheme of things, it's way less than 1%. So the mindshare is quite small. And my educated guess is that if you look at PSVR versus PS4 non-VR titles, it's a similar story. Here again, one anecdote from a developer working and having launched a number of mobile VR titles. The important thing here to understand is that even if mobile VR has many things going for it, for instance, less friction, less of those disabling contexts, it's that context of free-to-play, freemium market that you launch your mobile VR title in, so people are not inclined to pay for anything. So what I'm really seeing here is that, especially from the creative standpoint, there's very little genre innovation going on. It's incremental. You make a VR title and you take advantage of what VR as a tech, as a way to give that sense of presence, that certain kind of 360 experience gives you. But if you look at, for instance, certain genres like dungeon crawlers, as I've been looking at analyzing their design in more detail, they're very shallow. It's those gesture gimmicks having to do with swords and shields and stuff like that, and not much more. Same goes with design conventions. I feel that we are at a point where designers need to abide for these constraints in VR that nobody will miss in a couple of years' time. For instance, this waypoint type of movement. So once we get the locomotion really sorted and the frame rate, nobody will miss that, and nobody, it's as if a point-and-click adventure mist-driven versus the free-from 3D games we have nowadays. And then, as those charts showed you, the playtime is at best sporadic. So it's challenging for developers, I would say. So just to summarize, this was the framework, and how does VR fit into this? So there definitely the direction is, there's a drive towards mass market, lots of investment, companies like Facebook obviously trying to get it there. It's on a revival, and there is enabling context to it. It is becoming a consumer technology. It has this awe-inspiring, really awesome, potential, but there's the price point. It is disrupted in the sense that if you compare what it takes to put a VR headset still on, even on mobile, and the frictionless way that we take our mobile from our pocket and there's no friction whatsoever. So you understand, VR still has a lot of things to sort out. And as I said, I see many of the actual content, for instance in games, quite superficial besides the sort of VR design gimmicks, if you will. So I do believe that we're at the point that VR needs to find its own voice, and this is also from me kind of like trying to inspire developers to think outside the box. So if you look at how the web and the internet in general has developed from this sort of very newspapery origins to 20 years ago, Kevin Kelly talks about this in his great book, The Inevitable, that and now what we're seeing in the internet, it's not newspapers, it's flows and streams. And that's like the own voice of the web and the internet. And so what I'm basically asking developers is that, okay, what is the real voice of VR and how can we get there? So I do want to see some predictions. I'll put myself on the line. So I do think that you should look at the outlier genres, those sort of tilt brush, rhythm games, music games, stuff like that, that are very much in the minority still, especially with games. It might be the way to find something interesting. Then, user-generated content. Who comes up with the tools that enables actually people to create their own content to VR? In a similar way that we are filled with users' own content at YouTube, Instagram, wherever. And so if some of these factors are put into place, then I can see that, okay, in a year's time, in the holiday market, we are in a better place, and some of the real revenues are starting to come in. So that's my predictions. And then there are these inevitables. I referred to Kevin Kelly's book. It's bound to go untethered. It's bound to become more lightweight. It's bound to increase in performance. So, the momentum is there. So let's just keep on developing this stuff. It's also in my interest. I used to be a VR skeptic, largely because of those historical anecdotes that I shared. But these are the inevitable things, and then we should really start leveraging them as developers. So yeah, and if some of these things might sound ridiculous, then I can only refer to the Dator's law, that any useful statement about the future should at first seem ridiculous. So that's my burden as a futurist of sorts. Okay, so if you're interested in this kind of approach, how it could help your studio, get in touch to learn more. And I'm doing lots of stuff. For instance, now currently writing about VR game design tropes, looking at the more detail in the sort of design, analyzing games, and how we can sort of save ourselves or from ruining VR really as game developers set in our usual tropes. And then one thing that I'm putting up also in the coming months, a month or two, basically the month, is a questionnaire. So I want to chart, sort of gauge how developers themselves are seeing this market. So follow my Game Futures Twitter account so you'll know when that is out. And that's it. Thank you.